Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Anthony Moreno. In 2019, the state of New Mexico established the Outdoor Recreation Division to help improve equitable access for New Mexicans to the outdoors. Joining us now to share more about the division is Director Karina Armijo. Karina, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, I'd like to start off by asking you a little bit about the history of the Outdoor Recreation Division. Can you share with us a little bit about why it was established?
Sure. Back in 2019, or right before that, the governor had identified different sectors to basically diversify the economy, and one of those sectors was outdoor recreation. So it was really important to establish an office at the time to really focus in on outdoor recreation for the state of New Mexico. And at the time, there were about 8 other states that had outdoor recreation offices, so it was kind of new, and we were kind of on the front end of that, which was exciting. And with that outdoor recreation office in legislation, the Outdoor Equity Fund was also established. So I think the different reasons to establish the office, not just for diversifying the economy, but also recognizing that outdoor recreation was really, really important to support the communities and getting youth outside. So I can talk a little bit more about that Outdoor Equity Fund as well.
Sure, we'd like to talk with you about that. But first I want to talk about some grants that I know your division is pretty excited about, and that has to do with improving trails in the state. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Part of our programs are both the Outdoor Equity Fund and the Outdoor Recreation Trails Plus grant. And that really helps with infrastructure, outdoor infrastructure, all different types of outdoor infrastructure for communities, and rural communities, tribal communities, urban communities. And really the focus is on getting folks outside and making sure that the communities come to us to let us know what they want in their community when it comes to outdoor recreation. It could be a pavilion that we just built, for example, in the village of Cimarron, for residents to be able to access in their parks that's ADA accessible. Or it could be restrooms, parking lots, some trail signage, things like that. We've also funded skate parks and disc golf courses and things like that. So it's really broad, and it's millions of dollars that I think we're up to close to $30 million that we've granted in the last 5 years. So it's super exciting to see some of these, especially these rural communities, take advantage of the infrastructure grant dollars that we have been giving out. So we know that it's good for the economy, for communities and residents and visitors when they come to a community that has a welcoming outdoor and safe and accessible infrastructure.
You mentioned trail improvements and adding things like a pavilion in certain places. What other sorts of things may go into improving infrastructure with trails and public lands in the state?
Well, one of them that comes to mind is rebuilding trails in areas that have been affected by wildfire. We have certain areas where nonprofits that are really active in the community want to see their community back to where they can utilize those trails. So revitalizing those trails in burn areas is super important. And then also connectivity. And sometimes we have different communities that have done different things, but there's no connection. So we've worked with building bridges, or funding bridges being built in, for example, 2 different communities in Albuquerque. Now that the trail is now bigger and connects different areas where before you would have to drive to that place if you wanted to experience another community in that area. So those are a couple of different examples.
How do you feel these improvements in the infrastructure can impact the quality of life for New Mexicans in the state?
Well, we understand that it's not just the economy, but it's also physical well-being. It's quality of life. Um, it's recruitment for businesses. It's a reason for people to want to stay in their area. So there's a lot of different reasons, but we also know that communities want these things, so it's really important for them um, to be stewards of their land. And then when we're helping them do that, it's a huge economic impact. But what we like to focus on is one of our pillars and mission at the Outdoor Recreation Division is the health and well-being of communities. And we know based on a lot of studies and anecdotal evidence that being able to have these places, safe places to be outside is good for quality of life and health and well-being.
You mentioned health and well-being. Can you kind of expand on that and just how that can play a role in the health of New Mexicans when there is a well-funded infrastructure with our public lands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's well, a couple different things. One of them is the social infrastructure. It's not just outdoor infrastructure, but I think a lot of times recently we have people that are less get coming together because of our phones and the being in front of computers and things like that. So being in the outdoors and supporting places where people can socialize and feel safe and it's very accessible to all different types of people is super important. And also for youth, for children to be able to ride their bikes safely in certain areas that they wouldn't have been able to before without some of these focuses on the trail, improving trail infrastructure. So that's a few different things, but I really like the social infrastructure aspect of it because I think we've gotten away from really concentrating on those areas for people to come together. And I think that Trails Plus grant helps communities do just that.
Well, there's certainly a lot to be said about getting together with friends or family and hitting the trail and exploring the outdoors. I want to talk with you a little bit about something you brought up already, and that is the economic impact that our public lands may have in our state. With the support of infrastructure, with the outdoor recreation opportunities in the state, how do you see that playing a role in economic development in the state? But what do we know so far on how that's played a role and made an impact in growing the economy?
Yeah, well, we have BEA federal reporting that comes down to us every year, and that measures the impact, the gross domestic product of each state. And last year, it was $3.2 billion for the state of New Mexico, which is really significant. I think it's remember this, 2.3% of GDP. But also we have communities that have looked at the economic impact specifically for their counties. And recently there was a report that was done for McKinley and Cibola counties. And they were measuring popular trail networks and what that economic impact was. And just in visitor spending was $1.7 million. And 30% were visitors. And what's interesting to me about that is that the visitors are coming here. They're not the majority in this particular case. They weren't the majority of people coming to the trails, but they were a significant impact to as an economic driver to the community. So what I like to see is a balance, or residents really getting to take advantage of the outdoor recreation, and also it being open to visitors where they can sort of offset the cost by making a real impact to these smaller communities. So it's kind of the best of both worlds when we're really looking at the economic benefits to especially the small rural communities, but all throughout the state.
So you mentioned bringing visitors in from outside different communities. Tourism in New Mexico, obviously some folks want to see that industry grow. How does that play a role with your department and the funding that it gets?
Well, the funding is obviously separate because we're under economic development. So our focus is different. Tourism is one spoke of the wheel for us. We look at how do we support outdoor recreation industry, small businesses, outfitters, manufacturers, and so forth. The tourism piece is really the piece I think that Trails Plus can support, because when we're talking about investing in infrastructure, again, we talk about how, it's helping for residents and for visitors. One thing I want to make sure that communities know and the audience knows is that when we talk about tourism, the Outdoor Recreation Division makes sure that the community is deciding what outdoor rec looks like for them. We're not telling them, oh, you should really do this because you're going to get, tons of tourism. They're coming to us and saying, this is the type of tourism we want, or this is the type of outdoor recreation we want, because there are some areas that could be impacted negatively if there are too many tourists, like on one trail, for example. So really understanding what each community needs and wants is really important so that they can decide, when it's appropriate to support infrastructure in certain areas to help with that amount of people coming in. Sometimes it's like addressing having more than one trailhead and dispersing the visitors, for example. Those things we walk through communities so that so we're all have a plan and we know what we're supporting. So it's sustainable tourism or responsible tourism when it comes to bringing people outside, because we know that our public lands are wonderful, but we want to make sure that they're being maintained, that there's enough people that are cleaning the bathrooms or opening up the gates, that there's the multi-user experience is super important. So we have these lengthy conversations with communities before they apply and before we support them, so that it's supported by everyone in that area as we fund these projects.
Speaking of connecting with local communities in the area, how does the Outdoor Equity Fund ensure that more New Mexicans can gain access to their public lands and become familiar with it?
There's a few programs that we funded, which I think are great examples of that connectivity. One of them is up north. There was an organization that we helped fund to expand the Adopt a Trail program. And basically for an entire year, I think they signed up 20 plus different organizations to adopt a trail, and they brought them out there from banks to universities to nonprofits to local businesses, and they each got to see what it really meant to maintain a trail and have ownership to their small sliver of public lands. And I think what that does is sense of pride, sense of ownership, and a sense of responsibility when it comes to our public lands, and that we really need to rely on our volunteers and our residents to do that kind of work. But a lot of the times they don't know or they don't understand. So a lot of the programs that we fund create that connectivity. And it's a knowledge-based and experience-based by, trail people who understand what it takes to maintain and build trails. So that's been a really successful program that I think connects residents to public lands.
How does the Outdoor Equity Fund play a role in connecting communities who may not have the resources to go and explore a lot of the outdoor recreation opportunities that may be available in the state?
Well, Outdoor Equity Fund is for youth 18 and under, and at least 40% of the programs that we fund have to serve underserved communities, which in New Mexico is is quite a lot. um, and what's good about that is we're really investing in our youth to get outside in so many different capacities, whether it's learning to fish or learning to what's their surroundings. Sometimes it's connecting the indigenous youth with their ancestral lands through different day trips or things like that. But the other thing that's really helpful with the programs that we fund for Outdoor Equity Fund is several of them work with the career workforce pathways. So they're not only taking kids outside for a day or a week or even several weeks, but they're teaching them how to be a fly fishing guide or a raft guide, or someday biologists or things like that. They're exposing them to the opportunity to be in this industry and make those choices by just saying, did you know that you could be like a biologist, for example? I think instead of it being in the books when you're at school, you're in real life learning about plants and waterways and our acequias and things like that. So it's connecting youth to the outside more intentionally, and getting them excited about what the future could look like for them in this in nature and in the outdoor world.
So how does that play a role in developing the next generation of perhaps public land stewards or outdoor industry, perhaps small business owners who may be focused on the outdoor industry? Is that kind of the goal of a fund like this?
Yeah, it's one of the goals, and it's a big one. I'll use an example of a couple of small outfitters up north who were really struggling with workforce. A lot of the workforce that they were getting were from outside of the state, and they would be here for a short period of time and leave, and they were constantly having to figure out how to deal with some of the issues like housing and things like that. And they came to us and said, we have an idea to set up a nonprofit, a pilot program to really recruit kids here in New Mexico, in their region, who, one, have a place to live because they're living with their parents, and two, understand, because they're born and raised here, they truly understand. They're the storytellers, they understand the region. And so they were looking at connecting their needs, which is workforce, with what Outdoor Equity Fund could support, and created a 10-week program where they were teaching these kids from the high school. They connected with the high school, how to become a fly fishing guide or raft guide in this case. They graduated around 26 students that year, and they were able to hire 4 of them right off the bat. And they said they would have hired all of them, but most of them were still a little too young. So in a couple of years, maybe they now have the experience from this outdoor academy that the Outdoor Equity Fund was able to support and fund in a pilot program. And it was so successful that we're going to see how we can make sure that we can, make that even more successful in different areas. So it is what I loved about that one, it was the small businesses that came to us with an idea. We were able to support that idea, and it came to fruition, and it really hit home all the different things that the different challenges that we're dealing with when it comes to workforce in the outdoor industry.
Now, you mentioned challenges. I'd like to learn a little bit about the challenges that your department may be facing with connecting with communities and to educate them on outdoor recreation opportunities, or to take ownership in their public lands. What seem to be the biggest challenges with that effort?
Gosh, I feel like we've done a good job to get the word out throughout the state. And we're seeing, like, we have a map on our website that you can see the extent of, where these dollars have gone. So we feel good about getting the word out and also having these really great relationships with these folks to be able to do that. The challenges, well, right now the big challenge is the the federal cuts and whether it's the money or the staffing in public lands. Because when we work with these communities to support these programs or projects, a lot of times they're working in public lands or with public land managers. And when you get a call saying, oh, all of them retired early all of a sudden or have been laid off, that can be really challenging, and not understanding what the landscape is moving forward is really challenging, because you have communities that are really inspired and ready to go, or in the middle of a project. And when those type of things happen at the federal level, that's a big challenge. But as far as like embracing outdoor recreation in New Mexico, that hasn't been a challenge so much. Or if anything, we're trying to keep up with all of the different people and communities that are being really creative and thinking and how they want to support youth and outdoor infrastructure in their communities.
You brought up the federal cuts that have been going on. Just how have those impacted New Mexico? And you mentioned certain projects and things that might be impacted, but what are your big concerns about losing the public land staff at the federal level, and how that really may play a role in the mission of your department?
Well, the biggest issue right now is having them call us and saying we have to stop everything. It's not happening in all the areas, but some of the forests or BLM are saying we can't move forward with something that was already in the works. So that can be an issue. We're going to have to look at, as applications come in, how the amount that are on public lands, and how we can guarantee that they're actually going to finish the job. Although we are seeing a lot more of these applications come from communities and tribal communities, cities, municipalities, and counties, and tribal communities, which is good because they're not affected so much. But yeah, that's going to be a big problem, and it makes me quite sad, because in rural communities that are surrounded by public lands, and it's such a big part of their economy and their lifestyle, and their future, really. And if you have nobody to maintain those areas, or they have to be shut down because of the lack of staffing or funding or whatever it is, that's going to be a really big impact. We already have big challenge, which is the wildfires, potential wildfires. We're going into one of the driest springs on record, and when the forest closes, that already affects things. So imagine if they're open, but you're being discouraged to access them because there aren't people there. That's a longer challenge. That's a more difficult one to deal with. So yeah, we're trying to figure it out like everyone else is on a day-to-day basis.
One thing that is concerning to some outdoor recreation advocates and organizations in that field is the possible sizing down of some national monuments in the West and in New Mexico. There's been some reporting that the Trump administration may be looking at sizing down national monuments in the West and New Mexico. One of the monuments that was named was the Oregon Mountain and Desert Peaks National Monument. Of course, that's of interest to a lot of our viewers in the area. What are your concerns about this issue? Should any of the national monuments in New Mexico be sized down or maybe even eliminated?
Oh, it's devastating. All the work that was done to create the monument itself. And then I think a year ago, specifically in Las Cruces, or the monument, there was an economic impact report done. And it clearly states how essential and impactful the monument is to businesses and to community. So even downsizing it would be devastating on a lot of different levels. So I know I'm working with different states that have outdoor rec offices, both blue or red states. I mean, really, we think public lands is a nonpartisan issue. And we have some great support from a lot of different folks to try to figure out how our voices can be heard on what that impact looks like. But no doubt it would be devastating and discouraging. You have so much momentum and so much support. I think the Oregon Mountains, they've done such a fantastic job. And, you know, a lot of people like in the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument has looked at all of you as a great example of the good things that you've done, and now they're being threatened as well. So yeah, devastating, absolutely devastating.
Well, there's certainly been enough concern that New Mexico's congressional delegation has sent a letter to the administration urging them to leave New Mexico's national monuments intact. We'll learn more about this issue as it continues to develop, but I only have 30 seconds left with you. Is there any immediate goals you have for your organization and department this year?
The biggest one is we're looking at just supporting all of the communities and youth out there. Next year we have over $15 million to get out the door, and hopefully we can do that and have the state be really strong supporting outdoor rec in spite of all of the other challenges that we have.
All right. Karina Armijo is director of New Mexico's Outdoor Recreation Division. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you for joining us this week for Newsmakers. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time.